Welcome to the 2021 Nautilus Book Awards Author Spotlight Series. I'm your host, Christine Upchurch. Now celebrating 21 years of honoring better books for a better world, Nautilus Book Awards continues to embrace books from a wide spectrum of the publishing industry. Books which radiate hope and wisdom. Books which nurture our inner connection and inspire us to connect together as individuals, as communities, and as planetary citizens. This is a vast conversation, one which is more important today than ever before. Today, we are focusing the spotlight on award winner Dede Ranahan. Dede is a longtime mental illness advocate. Her 2019 memoir, Sooner Than Tomorrow, A Mother's Diary About Mental Illness, Family, and Everyday Life, was a Nautilus Gold winner. And it was a book dedicated to her son, Patrick, who, after a courageous, hard-fought battle with serious mental illness, died unexpectedly in a psych ward. Dede has 3 daughters and 6 grandchildren, and she says, I love them lots. And she has a new book that is also fascinating, that shares other mothers' stories, and it is called Tomorrow Was Yesterday, Explosive First-Person Indictments of the U.S. Mental Health System. Mothers across the nation tell it like it is. And she won this year in the Nautilus Award of Silver in the category of social change and social justice. I would like to welcome Dede Ranahan. And Dede, congratulations on winning yet again.
Thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate Nautilus Book Awards giving me this opportunity.
You know, I absolutely love the fact that you gathered mothers together to share their own stories. Why choose mothers instead of, say, parents in general?
I began a blog, Sooner Than Tomorrow, a safe place to talk about mental illness in our families, in 2016. At the same time, I opened up a Facebook account and discovered that there were multiple private support groups there for mental illness. And I joined a few, and it was mostly moms. They were making comments, asking for advice, sharing ideas, sharing their frustrations, looking for empathy. And I thought their comments were fascinating. I thought they were inspirational. These moms are fierce. They persevere, they're honest, they're open, but at the same time, the situations they were dealing with were horrifying. And their comments were like, to me, cries from the depths of human souls. So time went along, and I got to know some of these moms. And over a period of 4 years, I asked them if I could share their comments / snapshots / stories on my blog, do some editing. And ultimately, these stories ended up in Tomorrow Was Yesterday.
So you've compiled a lot of different stories, but of course, the most personal one to you that is so devastating is the story of your son. Can you just share with our viewers here for a moment what happened?
I'm not really sure what happened. A year before he died, he went to a new psychiatrist who had not seen him before and convinced this psychiatrist that he had been misdiagnosed in spite of 20 years of being in jail, on the street, missing, etc., and that he didn't have bipolar disorder. And the psychiatrist said, okay, you've convinced me. You don't have to come back here unless you want to. Call me if you need me. And he walked in. We were at my daughter's house. He walked in, and he was just, it was the best day of his life because he hated having a mental illness. So the year went by. It was really one of the best years of his life. We finally got him into housing because my mom had a house that we could put him in, and he got a job, he got a dog. Everything was looking pretty good. And then there was an issue with the dog, and he decided he had to give the dog up. And I think that was the breaking point. And he, within 24 hours, was totally psychotic and was 5150 to the hospital without our knowing. And then he was transferred out of county because there weren't enough beds. And I couldn't get a doctor to talk to me. One young lady said that he had talked to my brother for a few minutes and they didn't have time to talk to everyone. And then finally I got a call and the doctor was going to talk to me, and he came on the line and said, "I'm sorry, your son died 15 minutes ago."
How devastating that the people you entrust to care for your son in his time of need didn't protect him.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just talk briefly about mental illness, because I think that many people have this perception that it's just all psychological. What's your take on it, based on what you know as a mental health illness or an advocate?
Well, I've worked with advocates. In 2019, it occurred to me that we were in the middle of the presidential campaigns and candidates were discussing different issues, and nobody was mentioning this topic. And I kind of on Facebook just threw it out there. No one's talking about this. If we wanted them to talk about it, what would we want to tell them and have them be reiterating? So a group of about 100 of us across the country, through give and take, it was totally transparent, on Facebook, massaged this plan, 5-part plan. It's actually got 15 parts that we intended to send to political representatives to help them develop a mental health plan on their websites and so forth. But the number one thing that popped up, everybody voted on how to prioritize these issues. The top issue was to reclassify mental illness as a neurological brain disorder. It is not a behavioral disorder. It is a physical illness. And because it intersects with so many things like homelessness and death and incarceration, it is not only a mental illness issue, it is a human rights issue.
Fascinating. So in this book, you talk about what's wrong with aspects of the mental health support system here in the United States. Can you sort of categorize some of the issues that parents and their children and their loved ones are facing when they go into the system when they've got mental illness?
First of all, it's terribly siloed. And if you don't know anything about it, and most people don't when they enter it, it's very hard to figure out. Again, going back to this plan and the top 5 issues that bubbled to the top, one was HIPAA, which is a privacy law, but it makes it almost impossible for families and caregivers to partner in the treatment of their loved ones. And sometimes because they know their family members so well, more than the establishment, it becomes a life and death issue. Another thing is the IMD exclusion, which limits the number of beds and is a leading cause for why we have an acute psychiatric bed shortage in this country. And for instance, my son got sent out of county because there were no beds here. Another thing is a continuum of care. You're lucky if your loved one who's psychotic gets held for 72 hours, at least in California, 72 hours. But we need a continuum of care from early intervention all the way through to supportive housing long-term and everything in between. And none of that is happening on the scale that it needs to happen. The other thing is that so many of the moms in this book watched their ill child shot by police because they called them, they were out of control, they were afraid, they called the police, and the person ended up being dead. So we've criminalized mental illness, and I write to a young man who's got a severe mental illness and he's in prison. I don't know if he'll ever get out. The other half of that equation is a lot of these prisons now are for profit. They're running them like businesses, and they don't want to lower their clientele. There are so many issues. Those are just the tip of the iceberg.
So I think about two separate aspects of this. On the one hand, you've got somebody with mental illness who definitely needs to get the proper treatment and the proper care. And then you've got the family member or loved one who's trying to navigate a system that is broken in so many ways. How do you, as a parent or as a loved one, deal with your own issues as you're trying to navigate a broken system?
I think sometimes we don't deal with our own issues. I think moms in particular give their all, sometimes to their own detriment. I think this issue breaks up families, it breaks up marriages. And you're living on a constant roller coaster, or you're in constant mourning and someone is just really bad and then they get better and you get your hopes up and then they get bad again. So it's just a roller coaster of emotions and you're exhausted. You are just exhausted. And the mothers in this book are fighters. And so they're involved in advocacy and trying to get laws written and get laws changed and just getting someone that has authority to listen to them. It's exhausting. It's a full-time job. So I always say when I'm asked about a situation and I don't really know all the ins and outs of it, I say to the mom, take care of yourself. Get yourself to therapy if you can, or a support group if you can. Because I just can't jump into an unknown situation that their child is in, but I can tell them at least get help for themselves.
Would you be willing to read a portion of your book to us, please?
This is a couple of excerpts from the conclusion of Tomorrow Was Yesterday. The complexities involved in mental health care reform are daunting. We know things cannot be fixed overnight, but we have to start. Nothing will be fixed if we don't start. To start, mental illness, serious mental illness, and serious mental illness, we're talking about schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. It has to be recognized and acknowledged. For centuries, SMI has been lost consistently to other events of the day, like today. Pandemics, climate concerns, political upheaval, societal unrest, racial tensions, international discord, opioid poisoning, income disparities, poverty, food insecurity, immigration, homelessness, violence, and every other dilemma on the planet take precedence over SMI. Do a Google search of the top 10 issues confronting the US. Healthcare shows up as a main issue, but if it shows up at all, mental illness care is mentioned tangentially as an afterthought. As always, serious mental illness is buried so deep in the proverbial heap that it never beeps on the "we have to take care of this" radar screen. SMI advocates are not trying to minimize other national and global challenges. We simply want to be included. We want mental illness assigned meaningful ranking on the list of national problems that need to be addressed ASAP. Please note, serious mental illness intersects with all the major socioeconomic and health problems just mentioned. The bottom line is no one is being held responsible to improve our mental health system, even though it's everyone's job. Sure, multiple pockets of forward action exist, but a coordinated government effort with a national implementation plan with buck stops here authority, I haven't heard of one. So what can I do? What can you do? In the next few pages, I've included a grassroots 5-part plan to address serious mental illness and a sample cover letter. In 2019, I quarterbacked this plan, which was developed by advocates from across the country. It's a starting point. We're asking everyone to share this plan with their political representatives, their doctors, therapists, psychiatrists, pastors, family members, friends, neighbors. That's what one thing each of us can do. I've also added a list of 25 actions each of us could take. If each of us takes one or two of the suggested actions, we'll intensify the call for better mental health and better mental illness care, and for a department of actually doing something. As it stands today, the U.S. mental health illness system is filled with political landmines and gut-wrenching divisions. Parents versus children, peer organizations versus family organizations, voluntary versus involuntary treatment concepts, psychiatrists versus psychologists, turf wars, state versus federal jurisdictions, HIPAA restrictions versus parental rights, psychiatry versus anti-psychiatry, civil rights versus dying with your rights on, NIMBYism versus housing, traditional medicine versus holistic medicine, and funded advocacy organizations versus unfunded grassroots advocacy efforts. I watched my son, Pat, die because the system is tied up in bureaucratic and philosophical knots. Your reading Tomorrow is Yesterday, and considering what you can do to help our SMI families is appreciated by the mothers and caregivers writing in this book and by SMI mothers and caregivers everywhere. Thank you is an understatement. We value your alliance more than you will ever know.
You know, Dede, I think about how, as a mother, you sacrificed. You know, you had the ultimate sacrifice of losing your son, not only to mental illness but to his life itself. And you could have just gone on and, healed and tried to stop thinking about those sorts of things. But what you've done is you've continued as an advocate, and you've laid out many ways in which there are issues, severe problems in certain cases. So do you have hope?
Honestly, not for in my lifetime. I don't see the will being exhibited at the political level. The private agendas are immense and intertwined through everything. Like I said in the book somewhere, it's been 178 years since Dorothea Dix championed this population, and nothing much has improved since then. But you have to have hope. So I'll always have hope of hope. That's the best I can do right now.
And I think that these stories can generate both the attention and the awareness that is so important to kind of shift our direction. Dede, I want to thank you for continuing as an advocate. I want to thank you for writing these books and for giving these other mothers voices about problems in the system as well. Again, I want to mention the book again. It's a Silver Nautilus Book Award, and the title of it is Tomorrow Was Yesterday: Explosive First-Person Indictments of the U.S. Mental Health System. Mothers across the nation tell it like it is. Congratulations on your award, and thank you so much, Dede.
Thank you, Christine.